Cruising the Mediterranean is considered by many to be a dream vacation where history, luxury, and adventure meet, but it was not what I expected. It was so much more. Cruising the Mediterranean is a different vibe. Visiting the ports is like stepping back in time in the best way possible. However, this also means that a Mediterranean cruise requires special planning.
Hi, I'm Raquel Molina and I love cruising, and I just got back from a 7-night Mediterranean cruise, and I want to share all of my tips and tricks with you so that when you're preparing for your Mediterranean cruise, you won't make some of the same mistakes that I made, because let me tell you, cruising the Mediterranean totally different than a Caribbean cruise. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in, you're in the right place. So let's get into it. So, one of the first things that you will want to consider when planning your Mediterranean cruise is booking your flight. So, normally you would plan to book 3 to 6 months ahead of time for a domestic flight, but if you are going to be traveling internationally, you want to give yourself some extra time. Now, unless you are taking a cruise that is like a transatlantic where you're leaving from a stateside port, you will 9 times out of 10 have to fly to your port of embarkation. And it's competitive. I mean, there are a lot less flights available now, more crowded flights, more chances to get bumped. So you really want to plan for this as far in advance as you can. So the sweet spot seems to be about 6 to 9 months. And especially if you want to fly premium class, which is like that mid between economy and your business class or your first class, those tickets sell out really fast. So you want to consider that as well. So plan ahead. And also when you're booking your cruise, it's a good time then to kind of, surf around and see how much the flights are going for, because a lot of times people get surprised because they get a really good deal on their Mediterranean cruise, but then they go to buy the airline ticket and it's like, sticker shock, because, sometimes they can be high. There are deals to be had. So just, use your ChatGPT, use your search engines, and really try to find a good deal on a good flight that's going to meet your needs. And before I forget, another thing you want to consider also is when you're going to arrive. I used to say at least get in a day before your cruise. Okay, let me amend that to 2 days before your cruise, because it's just so unpredictable now with the traveling. On this last cruise, both going and coming, my flight was delayed. It was delayed by over 2 hours going towards my cruise and almost 4 hours coming back. So coming back is no big deal, but going there, it can affect everything, because it affected my airport transportation. When I got to the airport in Rome, I couldn't use the airport shuttle anymore because I had missed that cutoff window. And then there's the jet lag. So you just don't want to get in and just immediately start your vacation in a rush. So consider that if you can. I understand, sometimes we're, juggling days off and money and all that stuff. But if you can, really try to arrive at least two. If you could put more on it, that's even great. But at least 2 days before your embarkation. A quick bonus tip if you're flying into the EU is to pack your patience, because they are implementing this new entry-exit system and all of the kinks aren't worked out of it yet. So this added at least an hour to our time clearing passport control and customs once we arrived in Rome. So I think that probably in the future it'll get a lot quicker, but as for now, it was glitching a lot as far as accepting your fingerprints, and the machine. It had a few bumps in it, and it was quite time consuming. So just a heads up for that, that you will have to use the new EES, the entry exit system. So once you've gotten your air transportation all squared away, the next thing you're going to want to do is to book your pre-cruise or your pre and post cruise hotel. And you want to do this, you can do this a little sooner actually. I'd say a year to 9 months out. Don't freak out if you don't have that much time, but that seems to be the good spot to get the best locations. Now, I usually travel with IHG points, and because of that, sometimes the room availability isn't quite as much as it might be if you were paying cash. So if you are using a point or reward system, you might want to consider that when booking your hotel to give yourself a little bit more time. For example, when I made my hotel reservation for Rome, it was slim pickings. Like my first choice was already sold out. And so I had to get my second choice, which ended up being pretty amazing, but it wasn't as close to the attractions as the first choice would have been. So that's another thing that you want to consider is your location, your proximity to the things that you want to do. Because what happens is a lot of times you will get a cheaper rate because you're farther out, but you forget to consider how much those Ubers are going to cost, how much that taxi is going to cost, and all of those things that add up to maybe making that rate not such a great deal after all. So consider it out, weigh out all of the factors, and sometimes, yeah, it's worth it to be a little farther out and to save that money. But in other instances, you might be better off just booking your hotel close to where you want to be. So you've gotten your flight, you've gotten your hotel. So the next thing you're probably thinking about is securing your transportation from the airport to your hotel. Now, I like to look and see if the hotel has their own airport shuttle, because if so, that's usually going to be the best bet. Even though this last time it didn't work out for me because, like I said, my flight was delayed, which made me miss the last cutoff for the shuttle. So that brings me to having a backup plan. So you always want to have a backup plan in case the first thing you have in mind doesn't work out. Of course, there's always a good old standby of taking a taxi cab. However, you want to research, because not every city handles taxi cabs the same way. In some places, they operate kind of like an Uber, where you use your Uber app and order. And a lot of times people prefer that because you know what the price is going to be up front. Then there are also unofficial cabs that'll try to negotiate a rate with you and won't use their meter. Strongly advise staying away from those. And then, of course, there's your traditional cab. So for the traditional cab, they will have the taxi sign on top. They will have their meter on, and you will know that you are not going to have a surprise, amount due at the end of your trip. So when we got off in Rome, missed the shuttle, was led to what I thought was an official taxi stand because it said FCO taxi, but actually that wasn't the official taxi stand. The official taxi stand, you have to get in the queue from inside the airport and get into the official taxi. So it's a good thing that I realized that before getting into that other cab, because it would have cost me €20 more to take that ride from the airport in that unofficial cab than it was in the official cab. And having said that, don't be afraid of public transportation. If you are not dealing with mobility issues or concerns about maybe the time of night that you're arriving, you might want to look into taking the metro or the public train from the airport to your hotel if that's possible, because it will save you lots of money. I mean, it's the difference between maybe spending 30-40 euro as to spending maybe €8. So that's just something to consider as well. So of course, one of the main differences between a Mediterranean cruise and a Caribbean cruise are the ports of call. And these are some of those once in a lifetime places that you want to visit. So please remember, book those excursions early. I made a big mistake. I wanted to see the Colosseum. I don't know why I thought I'd be able to just saunter on into the Colosseum willy-nilly and get the best experience. No, that's not what happened. So I ended up not being able to book the experience in the Colosseum that I wanted, which included going to like the underground area. So there are different There are different tickets available for the Coliseum. I did not know that. I ended up having to get the general 24-hour ticket, which wasn't bad, but it's not what I wanted. And it's just really because of my lack of planning. So I don't want you to make the same mistake. So when you are thinking about those once in a lifetime places that you want to visit, go on their website and see when is the earliest that you can book those tickets. For example, also the Vatican. There's a certain time frame that they have if you want to see different parts of the Vatican. So do you want to see the Sistine Chapel? Do you want to see St. Peter's Square? And what do you want to see, so that you'll get the right ticket and you will give yourself enough time so that it's not sold out, or that you have to pay an exorbitant third-party price for these tickets. Because if you go directly to the Vatican website, for example, those tickets are going to be a lot cheaper. I mean, like maybe $100+ cheaper than if you were to go sometimes on a third-party site and get the ticket there. Now, having said that, no shade to third-party sites sometimes, because a lot of times those sites will also include a guided tour or some other extras that might make the cost, worth it for you. So weigh all of that out. But know that you can usually also go to the website directly and get your excursion ticket. My next tip for you is to consider the type of shoes you bring. The Mediterranean is beautiful, but the last thing you want to do is to be hopping around because you sprained an ankle or twisted something because you weren't wearing the right kinds of shoes. I strongly suggest comfortable walking shoes in the Mediterranean, because a lot of those beautiful old cities still have cobblestone streets, which are gorgeous, but they're not the easiest to walk on. So you definitely want to have a shoe that you feel comfortable walking in, that you can walk for long periods of time in, because you will be doing a lot on foot. A lot of the attractions are not so far that you need to take a taxi between all of them sometimes, but it's a nice little distance to walk, and you want to walk because, if you can, because you want to experience the atmosphere, you want to, pass by certain shops and just stumble upon things that you can only do when you're traveling on foot. But if your feet are hurting, you're not going to want to do any of that. So really consider bringing a nice solid pair of walking shoes that you've already broken in, so that you can really maneuver and get around those quaint European towns in a comfortable, safe way. So let me just take a quick moment to say that if you're liking this video, if you're finding it helpful or informative, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel to really help it grow. Okay, so now let's get back into some tips for the Mediterranean. And the next one I want to talk about is what you wear. So I noticed that the vibe on the Mediterranean cruises was a lot more chic yet casual. You're not going to find a lot of the beach party wear, of course, but I did find that people were dressing what I like to call cruise chic. You want to be comfortable yet still look really nice. That seemed to be the general vibe. Now, when you're on the ship, of course, you're going to have the formal nights. On our cruise, we had 2 formal nights. And let me tell you, by the second formal night, nobody was even dressing. It was just cruise casual. So don't get stressed out about how formal you have to be. I found, and we were on a Princess cruise, so I found that on the Princess cruise, it was very flexible. That first formal night when they have, the captain champagne and all of that, people were, pretty frou-frou. But by the second one, it was just like any other night, which was okay, because really with the Mediterranean cruise, it's about the ports, it's about seeing, all of those iconic sites and dressing for those. Oh, and another tip, speaking about that, if you are going to certain basilicas or the Vatican, places like that, they do require a more modest kind of dress. So you want to have women want to have their shoulders covered. Men and ladies want to have their shorts, at least maybe mid-thigh or something, nothing too out there, or else, they may, frown upon that at some of those locations. Another tip for your Mediterranean cruise is to purchase trip insurance. this is an investment and things happen, and you want to have peace of mind knowing that what your vacation that you purchased is going to be covered should something unfortunate happen and you not be able to make your trip, or something happens on your trip where you maybe get injured. Anything can happen. You just want that peace of mind. So I strongly advise people to get trip insurance, just to insure your investment. And also, this is just something that I did not know until my trip that I just got back from, is that if you are departing from Europe, if your flight is departing from Europe and your flight is delayed more than 3 hours, that you may be entitled to compensation directly from the airline. So look into that, because I did not know that. The airline did not make any mention of that. My flight was way delayed, and because I did some research, I found out that I was entitled to compensation, which it was just a simple form that I had to apply for and checks in the mail. So just, hopefully your flight's not delayed, any significant amount of time, but I just wanted to share that with you in case that's helpful. So guys, those are my tips for helping you prepare for your next Mediterranean cruise. If there's anything that I didn't mention, you have any other ideas or tips, please leave them in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching.